Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Saving the World Together with Luke Macmichael and Martin Rezny. Today, we have another special guest from the Golden Door, Joanne Flinn, author of the book, The Greensight, a book for companies to become greener and better in many different ways, and also the co-founder and chief judge of Through the Golden Door. Thanks so much for joining us, Joanne.
It's lovely to be here.
Do you want to just take a few minutes, introduce yourself to all of our guests, and we'll jump into some fun questions.
Oh my God, the wonderful pieces of details. We'll talk three different things about me. One, I had lived on 5 continents by the time I was 12, which I think in many ways has influenced how I think about the world and what's important, because having seen so many different people, so many different cultures, in so many different ways, it's hard not to see us as one great big family, as opposed to a lot of individuals who are wrong because people are operating from different values. So, 5 continents by the time I was 12. Oh my God. I have another whole life of identity as an artist, which is sort of my creative space. I have a whole different name. It's great fun. Because if you're going to be an artist, you may as well create totally and utterly. And then I run the ESG Institute, which was set up 18 months ago. Business leaders shift and transform their businesses into, what we call, a cooler, greener, fairer future. What science would call the under 1.5 degree world, the just transition. Cooler, greener, fairer kind of feels very, very good. And Tahir, so, those are sort of the 3 main threads of my life. Tahir and I have been friends for a long time. When she was working through the whole original concept of the Golden Door, I was, we were walking around and just talking about life and things like that. And she said, "Would you be the judge?" And I was sort of like, okay, tell me more about this. And Martin, to one of the things you were talking about earlier, I've done a lot of public speaking. And I started public speaking from having debated earlier. And I started debating because I was the kind of kid that when I used to get called on in class, I would be terrified. And so in grade 9, I joined the debating society with knocking knees, literally just so I could get over the fear.
Yeah, it happens to people quite often that they do the rhetoric, like something exercises like debating because they want to overcome some sort of speech disability or fear of public speaking. I actually know quite a few people who did something like that.
Yeah. Now, we wasn't fear. Now, terror is a far clearer definition. And so now I kind of laugh because I get told that I'm a reasonably good public speaker, and I facilitate and moderate senior panel discussions and things like that. I just say to them, look, if you're prepared to give it 40 years of practice.
That's all it takes. Just 40 years. No problem.
See the differences in the way it's built and my relaxation in it. And in one way, it's sort of a funny metaphor for, what you're talking about. And the whole purpose of this podcast is that, building a better future together, it's not this great big, give me the silver bullet. What's the overnight, thing? I mean, even when, remember the Pantene ad? Maybe, I don't know whether you're a part of the world. Anyhow, Pantene in one of the parts of the world that I lived, it used to be, shampoo your hair with Pantene. And don't worry, but it will happen. The shampoo doesn't even promise to act overnight. We are expecting.
Although there was one movie, I think it's Evolution, one sci-fi comedy movie where they literally saved the human race with shampoo, which killed all the aliens.
I'm sure shampoo companies really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Joanne, for that great introduction. So you're right. There's definitely no one silver bullet, obviously. I mean, with Martin and I, we've had the 7 kind of pillars, which are in some ways 7 different bullets, I guess, but they're all encompassing problems where you can basically pick any one of the million different problems in the world and kind of categorize them a little bit and fit them into these kind of easier to understand
I think we're
groups.
actually more settling more on like a different metaphor, more like a Justice League type metaphor. That like you just need like all like the different people who have like the superpowers like coming together and as a team solving the whole thing. So maybe more like that rather than
Yeah.
the bullets.
So you can be which superhero would you like to be, Joanne? Is the question. Which one do you most connect with?
Right, look, well, I have to admit, I don't even watch TV. I haven't had a TV in like, well, so look, it's in that, so in that living in all those, clearly some of them were very exotic places because you don't just sort of like chip around to 5 continents. Thank you, my parents, who had a huge sense of adventure. I didn't grow up with a TV from after I was 7. We just didn't have a TV up until I was probably about 15, 16. And so I never got into the habit of that being entertainment.
Interesting.
So like there's all these things where, and then I had a TV at one stage and it broke. It was like I haven't really watched it in a year. So
Well, that's kind of a superpower of itself to be kind of
Well, it's more like
separated from all of the
to
chaos and
pull a nostalgic show. It's more where in the world is Carmen San Diego type situation. It's like a cartoon thing.
yeah,
there you go.
like when it comes to some of the superheroes, like there's bits that I remember from way back, but all the new Marvel characters, all these, I just go like, tell me about it. And
Well, there's always Wonder Woman. I mean, Wonder Woman's kind of the catch-all that basically saves the day with her justice whip and makes people tell the truth.
Although
And
for the environmental people, there's more like Aquaman, maybe.
Aquaman's definitely more on the environmental side, but
Yeah.
it's kind of fun just coming up with.
Here's me. Which would the two of you pick?
Martin is Batman.
It's my favorite. Yes.
It's his favorite, and I happen to love Superman. He's kind of a catch-all. He's always been kind of my favorite. I've always had these dreams where I was flying around, super strength, superpower, martial prowess in all the ways, and just had a lot of fun saving the world as Superman in my dreams. So that's who I connect with. Some days I'm more the Hulk though, where I get a little angry, but in general, I like to try to focus on the Superman side of myself as much as I can. But it's fun. It's fun to just come up with analogies and find ways to try to be the best person you can be by using all these different examples. Whether it's what would Christ do? What would all these different superheroes do in the different situations? It's kind of interesting to put yourself in their shoes a little bit and think about it.
To talk about the different superhero, we're also sort of playing with this sort of what would Socrates do idea. It's like the debate superhero. If you want to go into that, like part of the tradition.
But it's a little bit of a preview for our next book that we're working on. It's called The Pillars of Protopia, Saving the World Together. And it's a group of about 12 short stories about the future and all about the world where we are today and how it's going to transition towards this future world where that's a lot better for everybody. And
I think one of the challenges that people have right now is there's so much noise about how bad it is and how insurmountable it is. And that just becomes a self-fulfilling existence for people.
Yeah.
Whereas there's been so many levels, so many really strong, significant changes that, the EU has moved so far in environment. I was looking at something the other day and I'd love to be able to quote the exact source, but it was something that was saying that something like 30% of global energy is now renewable. Like
that's great, yeah.
Like phenomenal. 20 years ago, it was dams and that was it, and we didn't even classify it as renewable. And now it's there's a third, which is just so.
There's been so much progress, so many good things to focus on, and the solutions are really all there. It's just a matter of deciding, which ones to implement. And I like to use the Montreal Protocol as one of the best ways where the world worked together, where we knew the problem, with the ozone layer and all the CFCs, chlorofluorocarbon that were messing up the atmosphere, and we got together. In a matter of 1 year, all the countries of the world got together and decided in Montreal, look, this is bad, this is killing us, let's ban them worldwide. And it was one of the greatest successes of worldwide cooperation, in the history of humanity. So the fact that we could do that 40, 50 years ago, we can do it again today. Whatever we need to do, we just need to make sure that the problem's clear, stop, muddying the water, stop with all the false information, and just decide this is what we need to do as a group to end war, to end, the worst of the pollution, and to mitigate climate change in whatever way we can.
Yeah.
We know the science is sound for the most part, and we know the solutions are good. We just have to kind of decide to implement them.
Yeah, get on with them. And that's where, and that's like the Montreal Protocol is just one of the success stories that demonstrates how, to your point, that people can make the decision and the action can create outcomes. Because when I looked at the Stockholm Institute's 9 planetary boundaries, the one planetary boundary where there has been the least amount of movement has been it's stayed within. Lots of the other six of the 9 are now way out. Was around the ozone layer. So the Montreal Protocol, and it's just like, to me, it's like one of the wonderful, positive stories to come back to. And just to your point, we can, and it's shown, and I come from Tasmania, so little island way down south, where we literally, like, the hole in the ozone layer, wasn't somebody's, a thing somewhere else. We had it. I'm fair skinned. I could go out for 10 minutes in summer before my skin would start burning. These days I live in Singapore in the tropics, and I can be out for, an hour or two before my skin reacts. I mean, significant difference just because of the ozone layer. And there are these examples of where, we have made these decisions as human beings, and we have these successes, and
the most important thing is to be positive and keep moving forward, and don't dwell on the negative. Don't just throw up your hands and say, "Oh, the world's going to end anyway. Why bother try?"
Well, I think that the other big one is lead. Like, that's also something that had like a huge industrial value, but that was also successfully recognized as toxic and banned and replaced by other technologies.
Yeah, mercury, asbestos.
Yeah, all the other. It's actually a whole bunch of them. Yeah.
Yeah, like this, isn't it? Like, this was, we start like adding it up, sort of like. I mean, like, I've got a notebook. I could go get it, but I might just hang on a second.
No problem.
Just over there. Anything. So we're going through my grandparents' things not long ago. I found these 2 little diaries. You remember when we actually used to have these little diaries?
Yeah, I have one of those. Yes, those are.
Yeah, even absolutely. I remember
that. That's so good, isn't it? Anyhow, so this one was my grandmother's, and this one was my grandfather's. And so this one's from 1937, and to me, it's just like the absolute example. So the sponsor for this diary, you can always tell because they're the people who've got the ads in the front, right? Was Hardy's Fiber Life, asbestos cement products. So 90 years ago, it was an absolutely major industry. And to give asbestos credit, it was something that helped people, instead of having fires in the house that would burn the house down, in the kitchen and the dangers that had, it reduced that problem hugely, which is why it was really popular. And then we worked out, hey, you know what? Wait a second, this asbestos is killing people. Asbestitis and having your lungs collapse is not nice. And then it got banned. And now that kind of thing doesn't happen. So, this is sort of like one of my little reminders of it just... how it has, we've done this.
Keep progressing, keep moving forward.
It's a bit like when you see the old ad where a doctor is recommending cigarettes to lose weight, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I kind of think that one might actually, evidently, it's quite good because it does tell you it's got other consequences.
Yeah. The real goal of all that we're doing to save the world together is to really just keep moving forward towards, we use the word protopia because it's just progressing towards utopia. There's never an end destination. There's never the one perfect place because you can always get better. And, one person's perfect world is another person's dystopia in some ways. So we have to just keep moving forward and find ways to...
nothing is solved forever.
Yeah, keep moving forward. Progressing forever is the key.
Yes.
And not falling back, not destroying ourselves or blowing up our world beyond repair. With some kind of World War III scenario or Armageddon scenario. Those are the things we really want to avoid. and working together to understand those problems is a really important part of the process.
So tell me more about the stories, because I think the ability to tell positive stories about what the future can be is one of the undersung brilliances when people can do it. Because there's so much brainwashing into the.
No, it's great. It's a good time to kind of get it out there. We've been working on it very much full time for the last couple of months. So we haven't had as many podcasts recently as we have in the past. If anyone wonders why we haven't been posting as regularly as we were before. But the real key to these stories is trying to have our own characters or our friends or our children or people we know kind of brought into the stories where we have permission to make them kind of real, to bring these kind of fictional ideas and fictional futuristic ideas into the real world, into real characters. So a lot of it's based on my life, in some ways, Martin as well, to some extent, but our connections building these different organizations, whether it's a World Bank that's going to kind of help make money fair and help distribute a UBI worldwide and help collect pollution taxes worldwide and with some kind of world currency. Is one thing, but the bigger things are how AI is going to kind of help us solve a lot of these problems potentially if we can do it well with some kind of worldwide mentor program where the AIs can kind of teach us right from wrong in some ways and help us learn the best ways to treat the world and to make the world better. So there's a lot of interesting conflicts, interesting stories that can come from all these types of problems. There's basically a different short story that focuses on each of the 7 pillars, and then several that focus on multiple pillars. So if you go to our website and just take a look at them, you can kind of see breakdowns of the peace. There's a peace pillar, there's a pollution pillar, there's a poverty pillar, there's a purpose pillar, there's a progress, which is the technology pillar. There's a finding proof, how to prove things so that we don't fall victim to the fake news, and how do we actually prove things is a very important pillar. It's called the TruthWorks pillar. And then the last one is just holding on to prosperity. How do we become more prosperous and continue to protect our prosperity as we move forward into the future, avoiding all the major Armageddon type problems. So there's a story that talks about the war of the billionaires, the how we decide that billionaires really aren't necessary, and one person having
it's basically
power
projecting a little bit into the future, how we think some of these things might hypothetically go, or like what happens if you do a certain thing in the future or not do it, on like this sort of hypothetical timeline of like if this sort of protopian transformation kind of thing actually kicks off and is actually going to happen. And so the reason we chose, because we sort of were talking about that sort of issue a little bit, like how to say the story so that it's interesting kind of problem. Because like Luke already actually wrote the first version of his sort of ideas in the Pillars of Utopia, which is also a thing that is available through our website where people can get to it. But that's like a sort of, you can do it like at first, it's sort of the straightforward way of like just saying it in sort of like it was like an academic paper type way. It's just like basically just saying it, like using some sort of political arguments, but just straightforwardly saying it. And we sort of, over the years of talking about it, sort of came to a realization. But I think Luke, to some extent, always wanted to kind of do that kind of thing. If you just do it as like a story, a fiction, like a science fiction kind of thing, where there's a way how, like a better way how to say it in a way that's more, let's say, gripping or like more immersive, more like you actually feel that it's a real thing that might happen, kind of thing. So sort of using the tapping into the power of science fiction as a genre too. But like one of the things we really try to do is that like the science fiction is supposed to be really completely realistic as far as we can make it in terms of like how we believe certain dynamics of the certain things actually work or would work. So it's like really a science fiction in a sense, like some of the first works of science fiction which are basically like political philosophy stories in like ancient Greece, actually. Like those like the first kinds of people who would like write something like the, Plato's Republic or something. It's basically a science fiction work, as I can sort of broadly define it, because like they were doing these things like Socratic dialogues and kind of stuff. So basically like having a discussion over a thing that's happening in their life and kind of exploring ideas kind of stuff. So it's sort of in this sort of general vein of like the original utopian, let's say, science fiction that was when science fiction wasn't even a thing that existed yet kind of thing, but doing it sort of in a way that the current fans of science fiction, we think, should like, as even just a science fiction on its own?
That's something I've noticed is that, being a big science fiction person in my time, is that there was a long period where science fiction was telling positive stories, albeit exploring challenges, but coming through them. So you future casting how the future could be in a positive way. And then it went into this whole, you can only classify it as science fiction if it's dystopic. And it's like,
Yeah. The biggest problem with stories about a good future is they kind of lack the climax sometimes, or they lack the villain
Drama.
a little bit, because it's a good future. You don't necessarily have all these horrible Armageddon type scenarios all the time, like most good stories have. So it's kind of a little bit of a weird, I don't think there's ever been a really good book written about like a good protopian type future. It's always dystopian. It's always, showing all the dark sides of things, Black Mirror style. So it's a challenge. We've kind of taken it on. Whether or not we do it well or how interesting we can make it is, remains to be seen. Hopefully we can do it well. But I definitely think it's important to get more people focusing on these positive sides and trying to illustrate those things, to give people hope, to give people something to shoot for.
well, and also in it gives them a vision of what's possible and what could be.
Absolutely.
And that's like sometimes I, in this whole space, I use the metaphor of, the great artworks exist because somebody had a vision. In fact, any building that we have existed because somebody had a vision. Like, I'm living in a building now. My grandparents lived in Singapore, back for 1937, actually, come to think of it. And, the building I live in now would have been considered impossible by the standards of those days. It just would have been fathomable that it could exist with the things that it has. And yet some human being got sat down with some other human being and they imagined something what could be possible. And then it became a problem to solve. And then it became something that started being a solution. And then it's become real. And that's what human beings have been doing, for masses of lengths of time.
Yeah. So Joanne, just to change gears for a second, if you had to kind of give like one piece of advice, to all of our viewers or to everyone in the world, as far as what they should be doing to kind of save the world a little bit better, what's your silver bullet for today anyway, or several silver bullets? I know we said they don't exist, but I'm just curious if you have any specific ideas or specific things that someone just getting started could kind of focus on.
I would actually just start with a really, really simple place of, say, deliberately do kindness to others.
Okay.
Deliberately do kindness to strangers. Deliberately help somebody in small ways and without the feeling like you need to get somebody back. Just deliberately do kindness. And it's, two reasons. It helps us get out of ourselves and our own spheres and stories and be a little bit more around other people. But also, it's a place of starting to say, well, okay, I can do this bit. I can do this bit. I can do this. But it's just like, you hear, military generals going there, inspirational talk to graduates, and they say, if you want to do one thing a day, do your bed, right? Because at least you've done something. I'm going like, oh. I had a mother who made it very, very clear, keeping, getting my bed made was one of our duties. So I've never had an issue with bed making. Rubbed it to me so early. But this whole space of, well, what I found is that when I operate from kindness, the world around me gets kinder. The world around me gets more supportive. The world around me stops being so black and gray and starts having more color and joy. And so, if you sort of ask people what's one sort of, simple, good starting point, that to me would be the place I would go for.
Yeah, and we keep coming back to that too. That's the peace pillar was the one that was missing from the initial 4, and that was somebody kind of brought that up with an essay that they gave us. The essay is also on our website as far as how to kind of rebuild the world in a more kind way that doesn't require all this war and fighting. But I think you hit the nail on the head, where just the small acts of kindness, caring about each other a little bit more, wherever country you're from, whatever background you're from, if we can all just see each other as humans, sharing the same world together. We're all on spaceship Earth, traveling the universe together, and we should, care a little bit more about each other. I love them.
Absolutely. That was reading a while ago, and there's this talking about, so it's some of the Tibetan traditions who I've had the privilege of spending some time with, and just like how, some of the senior monks, just super simple things like noticing a knife within a knife block one way, more likely to cut people, and turning it around to reduce the danger. Just, like, it's such a simple, such an aware and yet simple piece to go do. And like how many times in a day is it easy just to do a little thing, wiping down a counter so that it's more pleasant for the next person to come. And that next person could be you.
Every little bit counts. My dad always was the Boy Scout motto. You always have to leave a room cleaner than when you found it. That was the kind of the Boy Scout motto is. And so I've always it's always in the back of my head, leave the world a little bit better than you found it. Just try to make the world a little better each day. And 1% better over a year, all of a sudden it's multiple hundreds of times better if
That's
everyone works
basically
together.
the core of the protopian idea, or the difference between protopian thinking and utopian thinking. Is the utopia seems like 100% or 0%, like you have to do like a extreme revolution, change everything completely overnight kind of thinking. But protopian thinking is like, just do whatever small thing you can, and just keep doing that. Just like keep doing just like a little bit better over time. And then you have this, like, if you have it as a percentage, then if anything is growing by a percentage, it's exponential growth. So that by itself just then is supposed to pick up, especially if you have a lot of people doing a small thing. Each that's also added together is actually a lot of momentum. So that's why I think this general approach to everything is the best way forward.
Just for anybody who's mathematically inclined, listening is, just go and do the Excel spreadsheet or what Google Sheets or whatever it is. But you only need to do 71% for it to compound up to be 100. So I must go like, bonus world.
72.8 if you could just do 1% a day. I love it. This is great stuff. So also, Joanne, I just want to ask you a little bit more about your background with the Golden Door Foundation, through the Golden Door forum and such. Where are you with that right now? How did you kind of get to be where it is, and what are kind of the main goals going forward? I know the eco societies is kind of one of the main things I've been working on with the HERA. What's your main focus right now as far as that work?
So when way back when sort of the Tahira was working through the early ideas, it was coming from a space that if it's hard for us to speak truth, it's very hard to get to the depth of anything. And that's what triggered off the whole space of setting up the starting point, like the seed, which was the book awards, because it's such a physical, tangible thing that carries through time outside of yourself. And so it's not just a book award, it's an author award, which is a distinction that quite a few people have been doing it. So I have to go back and remember. The point of the writing is to evidence who the person is and the truth that they're capable of telling, and the depth of truth that they have the courage to tell. Because there's a lot of pieces that are socialized out of being comfortable to be spoken about, and yet are still that are very, very real. So we use the written word as the sort of the power point around that. And then that was so around poetry, essays, and books. And so it wasn't about fiction, it was about truth-telling around the real world, which was an interesting one because you can get some absolutely brilliant, narrative stories. And it's like, what we want is to find and encourage people to be comfortable and actually expressing and articulating a deeper truth. But we've had a really wide and amazing number of people, which the two of you know because you've interviewed so many of them. But just absolutely phenomenal for the truths of the world that they're able to see and talk about. And also the fact that they could do it even as someone who had absolutely horrific experiences, get through to the point of going, yes, this has happened, but this is who I am. And that's what we wanted to highlight. So, it's like who the human being can show up with. So that was the whole foundation. And then coming from that, then the next layer we added on the dialogues. Which, the discussion of the debate was such a wonderful one, because that dialoguing process that's used in the Golden Door is such a way of creating generative insights and conversation. Compared to the debating that I used to do, which was and I trained and graduated with a law degree. So, the whole attack process, and then destroy another one. And then, it's such a contrast to the Golden Door's generative dialogue process, which expands and continues forward. So, I think the dialogue process is the next sort of contribution in, and then coming from that, which is, as groups came in, different elements like, well, what else would be possible? How would it be possible? And so the eco societies is one of the the next iterations, which are absolutely phenomenal for what's going to be possible of creating communities and other sorts of ways of operating. So it's been an evolution, and then of course COVID happened, changed everyone's plans like it did for everybody. Yes, so it's been a big process and journey. And my core anchor role these days with the Golden Door is chief judge for the awards. So that's around the books, the poetry, the essays, and we're going to be adding in music, because that's also a very, very powerful published medium of expression.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we're excited to see all the award winners. Is there a 2025 competition coming up, or when's the next?
Yep. So the next.
When do all the submissions have to be in for? Are they all? Is the website active right now?
Actually, the deal I have with Tahira is, as a judge, we don't vote. That's not, we sort of keep out of that piece.
The Tahira is doing that.
Well, it's also partly because it's, if we see authors and books that we think could be interesting, we suggest it to hear. It might be someone, to connect with. But it's a little bit more just being really, really careful from the point of view of the judge. Don't get too emotionally involved with a single author.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's really been an interesting process as we worked through what will be a more powerful, more integrity truth process ourselves, in it.
We can definitely recommend everyone to go to the Through the Golden Door websites that we always have it linked in various spots on our website, as well as many of our videos. So go check it out if you're interested in submitting something for this. I'm sure there'll be a link there.
Please do, and just something to appreciate around the process, just because we can talk about that piece.
Yeah, no problem.
And I have talked about it in other forums. Is that what you do is you submit your work, and my recommendation that it should be a fully published work, because anyone who's written and anyone who's published will always tell you that, the publishing process is a whole new level of stretch, and it also changes the work, refines the work. And we are looking for, like there's some people that you would have talked to and you just go, oh wow, what they pulled together and how they've done it. But so you see it also as part of your own journey of growth. I certainly can say that because I've published 5 books, so I've written a whole bunch more that haven't quite yet seen that light of day. So I'm speaking from someone who's drunk their Kool-Aid, walk their talk, whatever phrase you want. So to be shortlisted means that what you produced, your written word, has got to quite a strong level of sophistication and a strong level of being able to connect to the other person. Because even some of the people who've written from quite a scientific place, if they've had that ability to connect through, that's the truth. So the truth's not just about my personal truth; it's about actually the truth between you and I. And so that's another key thing that starts to, I gets onto the shortlist, and what gets higher up on the shortlist. These are the sorts of things that we've just seen over time are the pieces. And so once we shortlist the books, we then interview the authors, and that is a very short conversation. And some people are surprised at how short it can be, but it comes to a very, very amazing thing, is that who you show up in that conversation is such a strong signal. We don't need a massive amount of your time to see who you are and how you show up.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I love the more people we can get involved in things like this, whether it's a podcast or a book or poetry of any kind, we're all doing our part to kind of make the world better and save the world together. So I love connecting with organizations like Through the Golden Door, and there's so many great organizations doing great things. We need to synergize more. We need to connect more. We need to inspire each other more in any way that we can. So thank you so much for joining us today, Joanne. Is there any? Would you like to talk about your book, The Greensight, at all, or is there any other?
Actually, if there's the button, I'd like to talk about greens. When I was, here we go.
The green, what's it? Profit and
it's the AI is blurring it.
I know horrible things. Sometimes you get lucky.
Profit and Planet. Profit and Planet. Greensight.
Greensight. It's a sustainability guide for company directors. And it was what triggered the foundation of the ESG Institute, because one of the pieces that I've found in the work that I've been doing over the years is it's not that there's some people who just go, we don't want to do anything about it. It's a relatively small percentage of people. A lot of people do, but they just find environment, social governance, all these terms and pieces so confusing that they do what most human beings do, is they turn around and walk the other way. And I don't say that in any negative. It's just like, this is what we do as humans. Now, I have this weird background. The reason why we moved around all those different continents, because my father was an agricultural economist. So I learned about environment and sustainability, from some of the masters at my dad's lap. We're over the dinner table, for years. I had a couple of universities say I've got probably a couple of postdocs in me just simply because of all that. So I got to learn about it so early that it's just part of my thinking system. And then I spent 30 years in corporate doing business and running large businesses and transforming large businesses. And so I lived both worlds. So what I found when I started writing the book was that I couldn't find books out there that made it simple in the business world, made it accessible in the business world. Because one of the things I know is that business can be a huge, powerful good, but it needs to know what it could do. And so the point of Greensight was to create a structure that makes it easy for business leaders to understand all the alphabet soup. Go, okay, what game should I be playing? Because it is a matter of choice. From an ethical point of view, it is about each organization picking how it wants to do things, and then going on what they could do. And so the Institute came out of the book because there's just business leaders going like, okay, how can you support us more? And that's led to training programs to be able to upskill people to understand these pieces, having simplified it so it makes coherent sense, and roadmaps and things like that help people accelerate their transition to a cooler, greener future.
Excellent. So is there like one main topic of the book? So it's getting corporations to just understand their green footprint or their green, the consequences of their actions a little bit more.
How it's actually ended up was that because most senior leaders are responsible for strategy and long-term direction, and there's so many components to environment, social, and governance. So what it's ended up doing is giving leaders a framework to be able to go, okay, so these are the pieces. I can get it now. I've got my head around it. Translating the environment babble into business babble, just to be fair. Both industries have their jargons. Like I was working with an investor a couple of weeks ago. I did quite a lot of work with investors, just because it's like, where do you put your money? What are the impacts it's going to have? And made some comment. I said, but you haven't got materiality in there yet. And he's going like, what's materiality? I described it to him, and he goes, oh, that's called efficiency. And I'm going, yes, and at least economic efficiency and environmentally, it's called materiality. And this is the thing. There's often concepts that have linkages that you don't know unless you have this weird background like I do, where you've operated across the two fields. So we found what we found was that leaders basically play four different games in sustainability, and into this transition to a better world. One, they observe or they deny. We call them observers. Secondly, they pledge, they make nice positive comments, but they don't really do very much. Think the organizations that go and do a CSR day. Beach. Hey, the other 364 days are damaging. So the pledgers, and then you've got compliers who are going like, okay, what do I need to do? What's going to keep me acceptable to the regulators and the customers, and my employees might actually stay engaged? And that's actually quite a respectable place to be at, because that's actually playing the game of doing the right thing, or doing more of the right thing at least. And in our research, we found that that's about 15% of organizations are in that space. Okay. And then we identified two other ones. One's called a transformer, and they're the ones that are deliberately designing for this more positive future
Hmm.
and making the business decisions and actions around that. And then the very sort of like, smallest group in the whole lot was the definers. And the definers are organizations that are designing for a circular regenerative economy, which is a whole different business model.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I have to write that down and think about that a little bit more. We recently interviewed someone. Michael Rada was his name, and we still connected with him. He has, it's Industry 5.0 is what he's focused on. And it's basically trying to create a wasteless world.
Yeah.
So he's been getting a lot of attention from corporations worldwide as the benefits of trying to build a wasteless world or a wasteless corporation. So you're trying to be more efficient, use your waste for your own good, to transform it into different things, and you can make a lot of money by doing things right without necessarily having to have government intervention all the time.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah. So it's definitely a great concept. I love trying to define each company as one of these 5 types and try to have every company see the benefit of being more of a transformer and a definer, and that those are the companies that are going to be successful going forward into the future.
Yeah, that would make for a very different Transformers movie, though.
That totally would be. I mean, it's amazing talking to the leaders that are running transformer and definer type businesses, just because of the way that they think of the world and the possibility. In many ways, if you think about sort of like some of the going back 20 years, to the .com boom and the sort of the technology dreams and how much was thought of there. I mean, that was a transformer play. What's possible. And then, as you were saying earlier, over time, sometimes you identify things that are, not quite, as healthy as you thought they were.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely, there's definitely a role for everything. There's the grassroots ground up of people forcing the companies to do it. We'll only buy from you if you're nice, and you comply. So there's definitely a level for certain industries where that we kind of have to have that, and you're going to have government intervention to some extent. We've met with a lot of libertarians in the past as well that I'm very interested in, the concepts of freedom and how much freedom is enough freedom. But it's definitely clear that you need some kinds of rules and regulations to level the playing field, so that it's not the companies that get away with the most or pollute the most that make the most money. You've got to definitely rein that in to some extent to kind of enforce the compliers and enforce companies to comply. Ideally, it'd be great if you didn't have to, if everyone was kind of altruistic and did it on their own. But to some extent,
you have to regulate the Decepticons, the other category of the companies.
The ones that just don't.
That's the evil robots in the Transformers movies.
Yeah, the deniers.
Transformers. But I think if you call like a category of like the evil companies who are just lying and making everything worse, calling them Decepticons, I think actually might be quite appropriate.
That fits. They're the villains to some extent. We've got to make it clear.
It's sort of one of those things that we kind of debated on whether we actually included that as an official category, and then it was literally the change management question was, how do you engage people so that they actually will move? And what I have found over the years is shaming people doesn't work very well.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely great point. We found that ourselves too, that we try our best to. It's one of our main focuses was always about depolarization. How do we depolarize the world? And that's right from the very beginning of the Saving the World Together. The key word was together. Yeah. We have to do this together. None of us can do this in a silo. We can't force you to save the world. We really can't do it alone. We have to just inspire and find ways to come together, meet in the middle somehow, and depolarize all this negative guilt of trying to guilt people into it. It's not about the guilt. It's about inspiring a better world or a better vision, that we should all want to do this. This is the path forward for all of us, and it's so much better if we just all do it together.
The other thing that I think that is helpful, like from the business, and even actually potentially from a libertarian perspective, is like, I grew up with a father who played rugby. The two of you kind of look like you got rugby. Yeah. And so I remember as a little kid doing what any smart little kid used to do when your dad was sitting there glued to sports. The best time to get a cuddle was to go and like cuddle up under an arm, right, when he's glued to the sports. It used to work really quite well when I was 5. And so I watched a lot of rugby, and it was just at the stage rugby was going through the change where you used to be able to do neck tackles. And there was a big debate about neck tackling, And like, so, like people who are like younger kind of never grow up with neck tackles. So they kind of like, or don't come from the cultures that have it. And I said, like, think about it this way. You've got the full grown man, like one of you throwing yourself with the other person around the neck to be able to pull them to the ground. Like, what do you think happens? Well, you have a lot of people that become quadriplegics and plegics as a consequence. And so, the industry, the rugby industry said, this is not who we are. We do not want to be damaging our players like this. So they lifted the game. They changed the rules and said, you can't do neck tackles. You've got to do it shoulders and below because that's safer. That would create better quality outcomes for all of us if we play that way. And I was sharing the story the other day with a gentleman from Bloomberg, and he'd played rugby as a kid. And he goes, "Oh my God!" He goes, "Absolutely." He goes, because we're kids, we go play, and then you get off, you'd be a bit concussed, and you'd feel like you're okay. And he goes, "The guys who had it really badly, 30 years on, really have issues." And so what we're seeing now is we played the game of business in a particular way that's allowed the concussion. We may have stopped the neck tackles, but we've allowed the concussion, and 30 years on, we're seeing the problems of concussion. And so I see some of these changes in the business world, people about, environment, social, and governance, the ESG-based changes, are literally a way of saying, okay, let's lift our game to play a better game.
That's great.
Yes, like rugby did and is doing it again because they're still seeing damage levels that they don't like. And so they're redefining the rules again to improve quality of play and reduce the negative consequences.
Yeah. And it's an internationally recognized sport. I imagine when they make a change to a rule, it's usually a worldwide decision to some extent that this is the new game. So we definitely have to follow that same concept with our companies and not have, one set of rules in this country and another set of rules in another country, because it's a worldwide game. And we need to get all our corporations worldwide on the same page and make it a fairer, better, safer game for all of us. I love that analogy. It's perfect. All right, excellent. I think this was just an amazing interview, Joanne. Thank you so much for joining us today. Martin, do you have any final questions as we move towards our wrap-up phase?
Maybe the question that we talked about with Luke, did you realize that, Greensight is a thing from Game of Thrones?
No.
I believe that's the name for like the power to see through time in the magically in that universe is actually Greensight, and there are like green seers are like the people with the special ability that they like interface with the magic trees, then they can like see all of time. So that's a thing.
It's a new concept, yeah.
I had no idea, and what an absolutely intuitive / unconscious. How brilliant is that? Because that's the whole point of the book, is to help businesses.
Yeah, because I think actually George R. R. Martin, like one of the big points of the whole saga that he's writing is environmental, actually. So there's like for sure some sort of thematic connection in there, I imagine.
Well, that's the interesting thing with Game of Thrones is it's kind of the most violent, the most extreme, kind of thing in our modern day anyway. It kind of changed the game as far as what is acceptable level of violence and horror. But at the same time, it kind of teaches us a little bit about, how to maybe build the world a little bit better and avoid some of this horror, and how do we maybe avoid some of this Game of Thrones style of evil.
Yeah.
To some extent, when you see things,
exactly,
it makes it less likely to actually happen in the real world.
Allegedly, based on the theories of the people who are trying to figure it out, to the great annoyance of George R. R. Martin before he finishes writing it, like the whole point does seem to be to like literally like change the world in that story. That like you have this all along the old systems that are terrible and are not working at all, like from the mundane to the magical, and it's about some sort of figuring out some sort of way to transform the world. Actually, very probably in the background of that whole story secretly. So that seems to be connected.
Yeah, we'll have to do a special podcast on Game of Thrones now that we've got the Greensight
environmentalism of Game of Thrones.
Environmentalism. We've already done a lot of them. We did Avatar. Avatar is obviously a great one. That I don't know if you're a fan of that movie at all.
On Cameron's side.
If you're gonna watch any movie at all, I would recommend Avatar. It's definitely one of my favorites. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely a mind-blowing kind of a view on environmentalism and why it's so important. So it's fun to kind of learn from some of the popular culture of our day that can kind of help us find the path forward together. So I love that.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. Thank you so much, Joanne. Is there any final questions or final comments you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Oh, gosh, I think there's so many different questions, but I'm aware that we've had a good extended session anyway. They'll save the questions for another time. But, my big wish for anyone who is in your audience and listening to this podcast is believe it's possible, because there's so much evidence in the world to say that this more positive future can happen. And it's a matter of each one of us making the choices day to day to do a little bit more, be a little bit kinder, and then my next task is going to be having a nice bedtime cup of tea, and then reflecting at the end of the day on the good you've done in the world, then have a good night's sleep. And then you can go and have a good day tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Great words to end by. And as we always say, let's save the world together, everybody. Thanks for joining us.